Julia Bennett came back to Lake Mercer on the first anniversary of my best friend's death, carrying a cedar box she held like it might explode. I had not seen her since the funeral. I had not heard her voice since she told me, with tears frozen on her face, that Marcus had asked for me in the hospital and I had never come. She stood beneath the porch light of my workshop, rain shining in her dark hair, and said, "He left this for you." I was too angry to open it. Inside the box was a brass key, an envelope with both our names, and a photograph of the abandoned lake house Marcus had sworn he would turn into a home for children who had lost their parents. The letter began with one sentence. "Adrian, if Julia is standing beside you, then I'm already gone, and neither of you gets to walk away this time." I thought grief had already taken everything it could from me. I was wrong. Before I tell you what Marcus asked us to do, and what he had hidden from both of us, like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, can loving someone new ever honor the person you lost? I repaired boats at the marina, lived above my workshop, and avoided the road to the lake house. People called me dependable. The one time it mattered most, I had been 300 miles away with my phone off. Julia stayed on the porch, rain shining in her hair. At 25, she looked both younger than grief and older than I remembered. I was 29 and had spent a year pretending guilt was the same as responsibility. "You can come inside," I said. "I'm not staying." I stepped aside anyway. "Then come in long enough to get dry." "Don't," she said. "This isn't a reunion." "No, it isn't." She set the box between us. Marcus had built it at 17 and claimed the scratches near the latch made it look historic. Julia touched the brass clasp. "His attorney sent it to me last week. There was a note saying it could only be opened with you present. You waited a year? I spent a year trying to become someone who could hear his voice without falling apart." She met my eyes. "And someone who could stand in the same room with you." Inside were a sealed envelope, a brass key, a photograph of the lake house, and a folded deed. Julia began reading Marcus's slanted handwriting. Marcus had transferred the property into a charitable trust called Harbor House. Julia was executive director. I was project trustee. The house had to pass inspection and accept its first resident within 90 days, or be sold to repay the loan he had used to buy it. 90 days? I said. She turned the page toward me. He signed it 6 weeks before he died. I stared at Marcus's handwriting. He knew we'd say no if he asked while he was alive. He knew I'd say no because I was already working 2 jobs and caring for him. Her expression sharpened. "Did you know about this?" "No." "Did you know about the loan?" "No." "Did you know he was sick?" I looked down at the letter. "Julia, answer me." Before I could, something small slid from between the last 2 pages and struck the workbench. A silver memory card. On the final line, Marcus had written, "Do the house first. Watch the recording only when the west bedroom is finished. Trust me one last time." Julia laughed, but there was no humor in it. He's still giving instructions from the grave. I picked up the key. A stamped tag read West Room. "I'll inspect the house tomorrow," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "That isn't an answer?" "No, it's the only useful thing I can give you tonight." She closed the letter. "You always were good at usefulness." She took the cedar box and walked back into the rain. At 8 the next morning, Julia was already there. The house sat on 7 wooded acres above Lake Mercer, its porch leaning and roof shedding shingles into the weeds. "I thought you weren't staying," I said. "I'm not staying in town. I'm finishing this, then I'm leaving." "Leaving for where?" "Seattle. I was accepted into a pediatric grief counseling fellowship. Marcus wanted me to apply. she said. I finally did. When does it start? 97 days. I looked at the sagging roof. That seems deliberate. With Marcus, everything was deliberate except the things that destroyed him. The door resisted until I shouldered it open. Dust rose through broken light, and the place smelled of wet plaster and old wood. We had brought her there 4 years earlier. Julia, raised in foster homes after her mother died, had said it should become a safe place for children with nowhere permanent to land. Marcus had fallen in love with the dream because it was hers. I'll call an engineer and start a truthful schedule, I said. I opened the letter last night. The clock started then. By noon, I knew the foundation was sound, the roof could be saved, and the west wing would consume most of our time. At 2, she found a child's drawing behind a loose baseboard. 3 stick figures stood in front of the lake house beneath a yellow sun. One was labeled Mom. One was labeled Me. The third had no name. Previous owners? I asked. Maybe. She studied it. Or a child who never got to decide who the third person was. She slid the drawing into a clean folder instead of throwing it away. That was Julia. Even while furious with the dead and suspicious of me, she protected evidence that someone had once hoped. I turned back to the rotten trim before she could see how much that small act affected me. By sunset, we had a schedule taped to the kitchen wall. It was ugly, expensive, and barely possible. Julia read every line, crossed out my optimistic estimates, and added 2 permit deadlines I had missed. She had always been quiet in groups, but the house revealed another side of her. Decisive, practical, unwilling to let sentiment excuse bad planning. You've done this before, I said. I learned to inspect every promise, she replied. Foster homes teach you that adults can mean well and still fail you. I wanted to tell her Marcus had meant well. The words died before they reached my mouth. Meaning well had not kept him alive. It had not kept her informed, and it had not brought me to the hospital. Over the next 2 weeks, Harbor House became the center of both our lives. I recruited marina carpenters, a retired electrician, and every favor Marcus had earned. Julia worked mornings at the clinic, then arrived with food, grant forms, and licensing notes. She treated the place not as a memorial, but as a home children might actually use. On the 12th night, we stayed late repairing the kitchen floor while a storm pressed against the windows. You skipped dinner, I said. I had crackers. Crackers are not dinner. They are when they come in 6 flavors. I handed her a paper bowl of chili I had heated on a camping stove. She looked at it, then at me. Did Marcus teach you to cook? No. Marcus taught me that burned food could be renamed smoked if you said it confidently. She took 1 bite and closed her eyes. This is annoyingly good. My mother would be offended by your surprise. I never met your mother. You almost did. Years earlier, my mother had invited all 3 of us for Thanksgiving. Marcus told me Julia wanted private time. Julia had assumed I chose not to come. Why didn't you? She asked. Marcus said you preferred it that way. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. I never said that. I know that now. Julia set down the bowl. He did things like that near the end. What things? Managed people? Edited conversations? Decided what everyone could handle? I stared at the exposed floor joists. He always thought love meant standing between people and the truth. You say that like you knew. Instead, I asked, why the west bedroom? Marcus said we couldn't watch the recording until it was finished. You've been avoiding that room. The west bedroom had belonged to a boy who died at 16. Julia once said it should become the first safe room in the house, because no child should be defined by what happened there. The ceiling was stained, one wall mold-darkened, and the floor buckled, but the windows opened towards the lake and filled the room with light. "Blue walls," she said. "Too predictable. Warm gray? Too much like a dental office. Soft green. Marcus would approve." I picked up a pry bar. Soft green. We worked 6 hours. Near dusk, Julia climbed a ladder to scrape plaster above the closet. I caught her around the waist before she fell. Her hands gripped my shoulders, her breath close to mine. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. A strand of hair clung to her cheek. She looked at my mouth, saw me notice, and I set her down too quickly. "Are you hurt?" I asked. "No. My ankle's fine." She rubbed both palms over her jeans as if trying to erase the contact. "We need a new ladder. We need you to stop climbing broken ones." I checked it. You checked the top. The brace was split. "I'm not one of your employees, I know. Then don't talk to me like I am." I lowered my voice. I was scared. That stopped her. "I can't watch someone else fall," I said. Her anger softened, but only slightly. "Neither can I." We finished without speaking. Later, while I locked the tools, I saw her standing in the newly stripped room with one hand over her ribs, breathing as if the fall had happened inside her instead of beneath her feet. I understood because something had shifted inside me, too. Attraction was not the dangerous part. The dangerous part was how quickly concern had become instinct. The next week, Marcus's mother arrived without warning. Elaine Bennett arrived in cream slacks, carrying a leather folder, and grief sharpened into suspicion. "My son's attorney called," she said. "I have concerns." Julia removed her gloves. "About what? About this trust? About the loan? About whether grief has made either of you capable of recognizing manipulation?" I leaned against the doorframe. "Marcus created the trust, legally. Marcus borrowed against his life insurance. If this fails, Julia inherits far less than expected." Julia went still. "I never expected anything. That is not the point. What is the point?" Elaine produced an offer from a developer who wanted the shoreline and could repay the loan immediately. "My son turned guilt into obligation," Elaine said, her voice cracking. "He should not be controlling your lives from the grave." Julia read the offer, then handed it back. "We're finishing the house." Elaine's eyes moved between us. "And what exactly do you think happens when you do?" "A child gets a room," Julia said. "What happens to you?" Julia looked toward the west hallway. "I go to Seattle." Elaine's shoulders lowered, almost in relief. Then she turned to me. "And you?" "I stay here." "Good." She closed the folder. "Then perhaps Marcus's last scheme will end with the building." "She thinks he planned this to bring us together," she said. "Did he?" She faced me. "You tell me." I remembered the missing Thanksgiving, and Marcus's habit of steering us into separate rooms. "I don't know," I said. Julia's expression hardened. "That is not comforting." 2 days after Elaine's visit, the county planning board held a public review because the developer had challenged our proposed use of the shoreline. The hearing room smelled of old carpet and burnt coffee. Half the town came. Some to support us, and some because Lake Mercer rarely offered better entertainment than a zoning dispute. The developer's representative was not cruel. That made him harder to dismiss. He spoke calmly about tax revenue, erosion, and the cost of maintaining a residential program. Then he pointed at Julia. "Mrs. Bennett is leaving the state," he said. "Mr. Cole runs a marina. Who will be responsible when good intentions meet a frightened child at 2 a.m? Julia stood before I could. "I will be responsible until I leave," she said. "After that, licensed staff will be responsible. And when a child wakes at 2 a.m. convinced everyone disappears, Harbor House will not promise that pain is easy. It will promise someone answers. The room went quiet. The representative turned to me. And what are you willing to risk, Mr. Cole? My marina depended on county leases. Publicly opposing the development company could make renewal difficult. Marcus would have made a joke and bought time. I had spent too much of my life buying time. My lease, I said. My business relationships. My reputation, if necessary. Julia looked at me sharply. I continued. But the house is not a favor to Marcus. It is a service this county needs. Judge it by safety, staffing, and law, not by whether grief makes you uncomfortable. The board approved the use permit by 1 vote. Outside, Julia caught my sleeve. You could lose the marina contract. I could. You didn't tell me. You would have tried to stop me. Yes, that is why. She stared at me, angry and moved in equal measure. Sacrifice without consent is still control, Adrian. The words stung because Marcus had taught both of us that lesson badly. You're right, I said. Next time, I tell you before I try to be heroic. Please never try to be heroic. I'll aim for useful. This time, she smiled. By day 31, the roof was sealed, the plumbing passed pressure tests, and the west bedroom had new walls. We had also developed a dangerous rhythm. I knew Julia took cinnamon in her coffee and forgot to eat during deadlines. She knew I counted measurements when nervous and kept clean shirts for me after I found wet paint. She began leaving notes on my toolbox. Call the inspector. Eat something. Stop pretending this board is straight. I answered in the margins. Called. 8. The board has character. None of it was romantic by itself. Together, it began to feel like domestic language, the kind built from repetition before either person admits it means anything. That frightened me more than the attraction. I could dismiss a glance. I could not dismiss the way I noticed when she was late, or how the house felt emptier before her truck turned into the drive. One Friday, we drove for donated furniture. A tire blew on the county road, and rain caught us before I finished changing it. 10 minutes before the rain, she said. Julia held the flashlight badly, I complained, and soon we were laughing about the time Marcus painted my truck what he called salmon. She laughed harder, and I did too. Then, as quickly as it came, her laughter broke. She covered her mouth. Rain ran down her face with tears. I forgot, she whispered. For a minute, I forgot he was dead. I took off my jacket and placed it around her shoulders even though it was already wet. Sometimes I wake up thinking I should call him, I said. Then I remember and lose him twice. She looked at me, eyes raw. Why weren't you there? I rested both hands on the edge of the truck bed. 3 days before the accident, Marcus came to the workshop. We argued. About what? His heart. I forced myself to continue. He had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. He'd known for 8 months. He was seeing a specialist in Grand Rapids. They wanted him to stop driving, stop heavy work, consider an implanted defibrillator. No. She backed away from me. He told me the appointments were for migraines. I found the medication in his truck. He made me promise not to tell you until he could do it himself. Her face went white. And you agreed? I gave him 48 hours. We fought. I told him I was done covering for him if he refused treatment. Her voice came out low. Then you left. My father had a stroke in Indiana. I left that night. Marcus called 6 times, and I turned off my phone at the hospital. And the next morning he drove. Yes, Marcus blacked out on the lakeside road, struck a tree, and died 8 hours after surgery. Julia stared at me as if I had become a stranger. He asked for you. You let me believe you had no idea. I let you believe the accident was random because I was ashamed. I spent a year wondering what signs I missed, she said. You could have told me I wasn't imagining them. No, Adrian. You knew facts. I lived consequences. She threw my jacket onto the road, climbed into the truck, and locked the door. For 4 days, she did not come to Harbor House. I worked until my hands cramped, finishing the West Bedroom one silent task at a time. On the 5th morning, she arrived with a county inspector and spoke only about fire exits. On the 6th, she brought a locksmith for the office. On the 7th, I found the cedar box on the West Bedroom windowsill. The room was finished. Soft green walls, repaired floor, one desk facing the lake. Julia stood by the window with her arms folded. Marcus said we watch it now. I set down my tool belt. She inserted the memory card into a laptop. Marcus appeared on the laptop in the lake house kitchen, gray beneath the skin and pausing between sentences to breathe. Hi, Jules, he said. Hi, A. If you're watching this together, either the room is done or one of you cheated, which would be extremely on brand. I need to say 3 things without either of you interrupting me, which is the main advantage of being pre-recorded. He admitted the diagnosis, his fear of surgery, and the lies he told Julia so no one would watch him become fragile. Adrian tried to make me tell you, he said. I made him choose between his promise to me and his loyalty to you. Then he faced me. After I died, you could have told her. You chose silence because guilt felt like responsibility. The house matters because Julia dreamed it first. Finish it, then change my plans wherever they need changing. Make it useful. He confessed he had sometimes kept us apart, not because anything had happened, but because he feared how easily we understood each other and mistook control for protection. I loved you both, he said. Sometimes that made me generous, sometimes it made me selfish. Remember both. My final request is not that you stay together or fall in love. Do not let loyalty to a dead man become an excuse to abandon the living. Julia, go where life calls you. Adrian, stop confusing punishment with devotion. If you choose each other, choose freely. If you don't, still choose life. Also, the hidden compartment in the box has the real budget. You're welcome. Beneath a false bottom were donor pledges, bank papers, and matching funds from a children's foundation. There was also a sealed envelope addressed only to Julia. She opened it alone while I carried the laptop downstairs. 10 minutes later, she came out with the paper folded in her fist. Her face was not broken the way I expected. It was angry, relieved, and almost peaceful at once. What did he say? I asked. That he was sorry for making me prove my love by staying afraid. She looked toward the dock, and that he knew I wanted the Seattle Fellowship before I admitted it. We walked to the water, where wind moved across the lake in dark bands. Julia stood at the end of the dock, holding the envelope against her chest. He knew, she said. He guessed. No. He knew there was something possible between us. I stayed several feet away. Possible isn't the same as real. Is it real now? Yes. Her eyes filled, not with surprise, but pain. Maybe it became real through every choice you made for children you hadn't met, and every door grief could not make you close. She looked toward the water. You don't get to say that because Marcus gave permission. I'm not. You don't get to turn this house into a reason. I won't. And you don't get to love me as a way to forgive yourself. That struck the deepest because it was the fear I had not named. I know, I said. She finally looked at me. Do you? I would want you even if the house vanished tomorrow. I want Seattle for you, though losing you terrifies me, and wanting you does not entitle me to be chosen. Her lower lip trembled. For a moment, I thought she might step closer. Instead, she walked past me toward the house. That night, I slept in the workshop and dreamed Marcus was sitting on the dock between us, moving neither toward nor away. When I woke, I finally understood the dream. Marcus was not the obstacle. He was the place we kept putting every fear we did not want to name. The next morning, Elaine returned carrying Marcus's childhood compass. Julia met her on the porch. I was repairing a window in the next room, close enough to hear but not close enough to make the conversation mine. "He was sick," Julia said. Elaine's breath caught. "What? For 8 months?" "He knew." A long silence followed. Then Elaine said, "He asked me once whether his father had been afraid before the bypass surgery. I told him fear was private and duty was public. I thought I was teaching him strength." "You taught him to hide." "I know." Julia's voice softened, though not enough to spare her. Adrian knew. Marcus made him promise. "I'm angry at both of them." "You should be. And I still love them." Elaine began to cry so quietly, I would not have heard if the room had not been stripped to studs. Julia opened Marcus's private letter. "He wrote that you would try to sell because saving money would feel more possible than saving his dream. He always thought he understood me." Did he? Enough to be unfair. When I finally stepped into the foyer, Elaine had placed the compass in Julia's palm. "Keep this in the house," she said, not because he always knew the direction, because sometimes he didn't. Julia closed her fingers around it. Elaine looked at me. "You were with him before he married her." "Yes. She was with him when you could not be." "Yes. Then neither of you owns the whole story." It was not forgiveness, but it was the first honest thing any of us had offered one another without Marcus directing the scene. At the end of that week, Julia announced she would leave for Seattle 2 days after the inspection. The final month became a storm of volunteers, donated beds, sprinkler upgrades, and county demands. Julia and I spoke carefully about schedules and nothing else. Some nights I caught her watching me. Whenever I looked up, she found another task. 2 weeks before inspection, a young social worker named Tessa brought a 14-year-old boy to see the house. Noah's mother had died, and his aunt was hospitalized. Tessa wanted him to see the house in case it became his temporary placement. Julia did not give Noah a cheerful tour. She handed him a paint marker and asked whether the game room sign looked stupid. "It looks like a dentist made it," he said. "Good," she replied. "Fix it." He worked on the sign for 40 minutes before wandering upstairs. In the west bedroom, he stopped beside the desk. "Whose room is this?" "No one's yet," Julia said. He studied the soft green walls and the shelf under the window. "It doesn't feel like a group home." "What does it feel like?" He shrugged. "Like somebody expects you to stay long enough to unpack. The house no longer belonged to Marcus's plan or my penance. It belonged to whoever needed it next." That night, I removed Marcus's memorial plaque from the foyer. "What are you doing?" He said not to build a shrine. He also paid for the house. So we'll remember him somewhere else. I replaced it with the child's drawing and one line. "There is always room for one more name." Julia read the words twice, then touched my arm. It was the first time she had touched me since the ladder. "Thank you," she said. I covered her hand with mine for one heartbeat. She did not pull away until footsteps sounded in the hall. 3 days before inspection, the retaining wall failed. Heavy rain broke the retaining wall at 4:12 a.m., and the alarm reported water in the basement. I arrived to mud across the drive and water pushing beneath the basement door. I killed the power and called the crew. Julia pulled in wearing pajama pants beneath Marcus's field jacket. "Wall gave way," I told her. The basement's flooding. The licensing records are down there. I moved them yesterday. The donor contracts? Scanned? The cedar box? We both looked toward the west hallway. Upstairs. Another section of earth struck the foundation hard enough to shake the windows. Julia, I caught her shoulders. We are not risking your life for paper. The west window doesn't latch. Marcus's letter is in that room. Paper is not worth you. She tried to pull away. Then a voice came from upstairs. Noah! Julia shouted. The boy stood barefoot in borrowed sweatpants, terrified. Tessa had brought Noah for one emergency night after his aunt's surgery, and a foster placement collapsed. Julia had agreed to supervise him upstairs. Julia released my hand and ran for the stairs. Another impact tilted the hallway floor as Noah froze near the landing, a ceiling crack widening behind him. I moved past Julia, keeping my voice level. Noah, remember the game room sign? His eyes locked on mine. I need you downstairs, I said. Someone has to insult the rest of my design choices. 3 steps, I said. Then 3 more. He moved. A beam split behind him. I lifted him over the broken section and followed Julia down as plaster collapsed across the landing. We reached the porch seconds before the west corner settled into the softened ground. Outside, Noah shook against Julia while she repeated, "You're okay." I called emergency services and stared at the cracked wall. 90 days of work, Marcus's money, and Noah's possible room had nearly vanished in half a minute. The fire chief closed the building, and the county canceled inspection. The engineer said repairs were possible, but not before the deadline 48 hours away. Elaine arrived with the attorney and the purchase offer. Julia stood in the muddy drive, Marcus's jacket streaked brown. No. The attorney looked apologetic. Marcus insisted on a fixed date. Elaine offered a sale that would clear the loan and fund Julia's fellowship. If Julia fought, she could lose the house, the money, and Seattle. If she signed, the dream ended cleanly. Noah watched from beside the ambulance, waiting to learn whether hope was temporary again. Julia took the purchase offer. For 1 second, I thought grief had finally beaten practicality into surrender. Then she tore it in half. The contract says the building has to pass inspection, Julia said. It does not say which building. The trust owns all project assets, Julia said. Adrian's apartment can qualify as a temporary satellite residence if we bring it to code. Tessa stepped forward. Noah needs placement for 14 days. The attorney looked at the contract, then at Julia. It might work. No, Julia replied. This is adapting to conditions. She looked at me. Will you let Harbor House open in your home? Privacy and caution rose in me. Then I looked at Noah. Yes. For the next 36 hours, the town moved faster than grief. We emptied my apartment, converted the office, installed a rail and ramp, and convinced county departments to inspect together. Elaine called donors. The marina crew built shelves. My mother drove overnight with sheets, towels, and enough food for 20 people. When she met Julia, she hugged her without asking and said, "Marcus kept us apart long enough." At 3:40 on the final afternoon, the satellite residence passed inspection. At 4:05, Noah carried 1 duffel bag into the office bedroom. At 4:12, Julia signed the activation form. The trust survived with 48 minutes remaining. Everyone cheered except Julia. She stood at the workshop window, looking across the lake at the damaged house. "We did it," I said. "We survived a technicality. We gave Noah a place to unpack." That drew the smallest smile. Then she turned toward me. "I leave tomorrow night." I had known she would leave. Knowing did nothing. She studied my face. "Why aren't you asking me to stay? Because Seattle is yours. Because Marcus doesn't get to choose for you, and neither do I. What if I want you to ask?" I moved closer. Then stay. Stay because I love you, I said. But don't stay because I asked. Go if Seattle is yours. I'll rebuild the house, take every call, and cross the distance. I will not turn love into a locked door. You love me? Long enough to know it isn't grief. Not long enough to pretend I'm not terrified. Then she stepped forward and kissed me. The kiss was careful, questioning and alive. I touched her face, giving her room to stop. She did not. When we parted, she rested her forehead against mine. I'm still going, she whispered. I know. I need that fellowship. I know. I don't know what we look like from 2,000 miles away. I have weekends, airline miles, and honesty. I have no intention of losing you because distance is inconvenient. At the airport, we promised calls, visits, and the right to admit when it hurt. We promised not to use Marcus against ourselves. On the envelope, Julia had written, "Ask me again when Harbor House opens for real." The repaired house passed 6 months later. The foundation was reinforced, the retaining wall rebuilt, and the west bedroom restored. Noah had returned to his aunt, but he came back to hang the game room sign and inspect every design choice I had made without him. Julia flew in the night before the opening. We had survived delayed flights, missed calls, jealousy, and one argument about banning the phrase, "I'm fine." We also learned the geography of effort. I knew which coffee shop she used after hard counseling sessions. She knew when the marina grew quiet enough for me to admit I was lonely. Distance did not disappear. We learned to cross it deliberately. At the opening, Elaine placed Marcus's compass beside the child's drawing beneath a simple plaque about finding the next right direction. The first residents arrived with mismatched backpacks. Julia met them at the door and promised they could choose rooms after seeing the lake. The youngest boy pointed to the drawing in the foyer. "Who's the person without a name?" "Anyone who needs one," I said. The first night Harbor House operated at full capacity, one of the younger girls refused to sleep unless the hallway light stayed on. Julia sat outside her door with a stack of intake forms, while I repaired a loose hinge nearby. Neither of us called attention to the fact that we had been there an hour. Finally, the girl whispered, "Are you still there?" Julia answered, "Yes." 10 minutes later, the question came again. "Yes," Julia said. On the third time, I answered with her. The child slept. Julia leaned her head against the wall. "That is the whole job, isn't it?" "What?" "Answering until they believe you." I thought about Marcus's unanswered calls, Julia's year of silence, and every promise that had failed because someone assumed love should be understood without being spoken. "Then we keep answering," I said. She reached for my hand in the dim hallway. It was not a grand moment. No music, no witnesses, no final message from the dead. That was why it mattered. Our life was no longer being shaped by what Marcus had arranged. It was being built from the small choices we made after his plans ended. After the children slept, Julia and I walked to the dock. The boards still creaked, but nothing felt haunted. "I accepted a job," she said. My heart stumbled. "In Seattle?" "Grand Rapids. I'll help run a children's grief program and split my time with Harbor House. That sounds suspiciously like managing information." I smiled. "Are you coming home?" She took both my hands. "I'm choosing a home. There's a difference." I gave her the brass key from Marcus's box. Its new tag read, "Julia." "I was supposed to ask you again," I said. "Stay because I love who you are when no one is watching, and because every future I want has room for your choices." She closed my fingers around the key and pressed our hands to her heart. "Yes," she said. But I want my own closet. You can have 2, and no smoked dinners. That is an attack on tradition." She kissed me before I could defend myself. A year later, on the 2nd anniversary of Marcus's death, we did not gather at a cemetery. We ate at the long kitchen table with Noah, Elaine, my mother, and the children who now called the house home. After dessert, we played only the final minute of Marcus's recording. Do not let loyalty to a dead man become an excuse to abandon the living. The room stayed quiet until one of the children asked whether Marcus had been a good man. "He was a real man," she said. "He loved people. He made mistakes. He tried to repair some of them. We remember all of it." Marcus's request had never been permission to love. It was a demand that we stop using his memory as a place to hide. The heart does not honor one love by refusing another. It honors love by becoming braver with the life that remains. That night, Julia and I stood beneath the framed drawing in the foyer. The nameless third figure no longer looked lonely. She slipped the brass key into my palm. "You keep it tonight," she said. "Why?" "Because tomorrow we make copies." "For the staff?" "For the people who need to come home." I looked at the scuffed floors, shoes by the stairs, and the woman who had chosen this life without surrendering her own. For the first time since Marcus died, the key did not feel like something he had left behind. It felt like something we had carried forward. When grief says loving again is betrayal, remember that real love never asks us to remain broken. Share this story with someone who needs that permission, and subscribe for more stories where courage leads people home.